So I heard about Croc a couple of years ago, heard that it might be available for a remaster. And the issue at the time was that nobody had source code available. So I did a little hunt around the internet and found out about this Croc Definitive Edition that someone had released anonymously, and did a little bit of digging and was able to find them. And it turns out they had found source code some years earlier on the internet, and we were able to get hold of that and do some experiments and sort of confirm that we could be able to make a remaster. My role here has been sort of the project lead here at Titanium Studios, and so I'm also the managing director, so I run the team, and but also my background's technical, so I do some of the engineering, but we have some really good engineers on the team here.
I'm a lead engineer here at Titanium. I've come onto the Croc project to help with all sorts of things, really. But a lot of the kind of user experience side of things, making the controls feel a little bit more modern, getting some more kind of fluid camera control in there as well. And also helping with some of the graphics, because we wanted to make it look a little shiny and new. I think when we get the source code, the first thing we try and do is figure out what's needed to be able to compile it again. How do we actually get this thing running in some form, maybe even without graphics, just to see if we can run it.
I mean, I think also the first thing I do is try and see if we can figure out if it's all there or if there's enough of it there. We don't necessarily need all of the code. We don't need the code for the original platforms necessarily, but we certainly need, the gameplay code and the things that make Croc Croc. Yeah, a lot of the game logic, like the gameplay, is written in a language called, well, I've forgotten it, Argonaut scripting language, I think it is. And yes, it's a very customized system. And the tools for those are all lost, actually. So if we have to sort of do some reverse engineering and sort of convert the binaries for that back into some kind of usable source code in order to be able to modify them. So while we did find source code, it was just to the sort of the final shipping game. So all of the custom tools that Argonaut had built back in the day, we don't have any of those. And we don't have any of the original data, or very little of it. And we don't have any of the original Argonaut scripting language scripts. So
part of the work we've done in like modernizing the controls, for example, means we've made some changes to how the characters might move between different states, and any kind of special input handling we might need to do in some of those transitions. And although we've got source code, we've also got a significant portion which is compiled code that we don't tend to go into and mess with if we can help it. So we've kind of got like an extra layer on top where we can hook into certain things, like, for example, detecting when a different animation plays, and then we can figure out, okay, well, what character is that playing on? And then hook into that as a kind of like workaround for being able to insert some of our own code to kind of hijack what the original was doing and smooth things out a little. So the original game had these tank controls, right? Where you had the original PlayStation controller. It didn't even come with joysticks originally. So you just had the D-pad, you just had digital inputs. And the way that they implemented that was that you would press up on the D-pad and Croc would move in whatever direction he was facing. Left and right, he would rotate left or right. And so, yeah, we call it tank controls because he kind of moved like a tank. We didn't want to completely remove that for people who have nostalgia for it, right? It's not a common approach to controls these days, but there are speedrunners who have mastered it. There are all of these players who have these memories of it. So we wanted to preserve it whilst also offering a more modern approach alongside it. And the way in which we've handled that is essentially kept the tank controls as they were, basically, on the D-pad. Meanwhile, if you want to get the more kind of modern, typical platformer control experience, you've got the joystick. And so at any point in time, you can just freely swap between them. The camera behavior will also swap. So if you start using the D-pad, the camera will fall in behind Croc and follow him around closer to how it originally behaved. Whereas if you're using the joystick, you can use the right stick as well to swing the camera around freely and have full control like you would expect from a more modern game.
Everyone has a certain expectation of how a 3D platformer plays now, and those controls at the time, which were quite innovative, but again, the original controller didn't have analog controls, and nobody knew how a 3D platformer was supposed to work back then. But we're 20 plus years later now, and everyone has certain expectations. But certainly when the analog controls were first done, you pick up the controller and it was just immediately intuitive to play and 5 times more enjoyable. So I think everyone that remembers the game is going to love having these new controls. One of the other things about Croc is it has an enormous amount of content. There's hundreds of level maps in there and thousands of textures and I think a couple of hundred models or something as well. And so the combination of sort of this volume of content and the way it was made was going to make sort of the traditional approach of having artists hand upscale and improve the quality of these assets wasn't going to work, because it was going to be too much burden on the artist to fix all of these issues. And so what we ended up coming up with was a couple of pieces of technology where it's all done by automated pipelines, but those pipelines are sort of configured and guided by artists. One of the interesting challenges on this Croc remaster has been the way the original 3D game content was created, because it was created for consoles that didn't have particularly accurate rendering. And so things like worrying about, cracks between parts of the objects, or the textures filtering smoothly, those things don't really apply to those consoles because they couldn't do any of that anyway. And if we just stick that content straight on a modern console, you find that sort of you get parts of the model that look clean, and then you get parts that look really unpleasant with big cracks in them and unpleasant seams and what have you. So we have these up-resed smooth models in the game now, which came out quite good, and those are all done by a proprietary system we have here at Titanium, and then the settings for those per model or per character, per level map, etc., are set by an artist. And then the second part we have is also with the textures, and that one in particular required a lot of work to stitch all the seams back together and then upscale them in a way that had very clean seams. And so we've ended up with quite a good improvement in the visual quality and fixed a lot of, what at the time weren't issues, but are certainly issues now. And been able to do that in a way where, it wasn't 50 years of art time or anything like that on it. So, yeah. I think we do have our rendering looking more similar to the pre-rendered marketing images, and in fact a lot of the subdivision surfaces that were probably used on the pre-renders on the poster behind are indeed used as part of our smoothing technology. So with the music, we ended up having to source the tracks from several different places, and so in some cases the only complete source was the PlayStation version. And those are at quite high quality, so that works out well anyway. On on a couple of tracks, the PC version had complete full-length tracks that were full quality. But one of the issues with the PC version tracks is that while they were CD audio quality, in order to fit them on the CD or on the original disc, they were actually shortened. And so for the shortened ones, we didn't use those. And then quite late in development, one of the original people involved with the development, Croc, found a box of memorabilia that they had, and one of them was an audio CD that someone had put together, and they had just assembled like a good portion of the tracks, not all of them, but a decent number of the tracks at CD audio quality. And so where we had them, we used those. And in fact, that CD and another earlier, I don't know what to call it, beta, but a much earlier version of the music is available in the in our museum content section of the game. I think if we're thinking about some unexpected issues that came up, the one thing that surprised me repeatedly was, I guess, the amount of content or the amount of effort that was put into the original game. And so I was sort of constantly surprised by, the volume of, how many models were created, how many maps were created, actually how much music there was. And that goes across the board in the scripting language scripts, for the character AI. The game was very sophisticated, I think, for the time, and probably had a lot to do with why it was so popular. I have this picture in my head that an old game from '97 is going to be quite simple and done by a small team, and I wouldn't say that was the case with Croc. I think the original team did an amazing job of just creating a very full and complete game that, again, quite surprisingly stands up very well compared to modern titles. So my belief is that the original developers will be quite pleased with what we've got. And because, yes, we've put a lot of effort into trying to make sure that the original character and feeling of the game is preserved, and the original look. And we have also put in, the extra modes so that we can, players can adjust the graphic settings to make the game look, more consistent with the original if they prefer the original look of the game. I think we've been very fortunate that, this game is close to Jez Sand's heart, and he has, given us the green light to do a really high quality remaster on it. And so I know I'm very happy that we've been able to, really do our best effort on this one and polish the game and make it look as good as, we know how to do. And I think everyone that's a fan of the original game is going to be able to see that and appreciate it.